What's up, you guys? I'm Rachel Demita, and welcome to the Courtside Club, and welcome to the very first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, you guys. I am so excited for what we have planned for Courtside Club this year, and I hope that you guys are too. So let's jump in to our very first video with the tiniest bit of drama, but I think we can get something out of this conversation. So let's talk about it. Jeff Teague is under fire this week for comments that were made on his 520 podcast. Now, he has a podcast where he sits with two of his friends, and it's honestly pretty successful. It's one of the most successful NBA podcasts, or like former NBA player podcasts. It's kind of like just the boys sitting around telling stories. Jeff Teague is a great storyteller, and he has a lot of funny and good stories. So that's pretty much just like the premise of the show. Sometimes they will have guests on the show, but this week he's been under fire because of the things that they have said about the WNBA, and most specifically the things that they've said about A'ja Wilson and Angel Reese. I'm gonna quickly gloss over what was said about Angel Reese. So they had Charleston White on the show. He is somebody who, I mean, I don't even know how to describe him. I believe that he's considered a comedian, but his comments oftentimes, and it's not just on this show, it's been on other podcasts and things on social media, it's always some sort of like shocking comment and things that he will say, and specifically things that he will say about women. The things that he said about Angel Reese were disgusting. I'm not going to show them or go into it. It's just not, like, to me, it's not funny. It's not good content. I don't truly understand. Like, I mean, I would understand why they would have Charleston White, because some people do actually think he's funny, but to have him on and then he goes on this rant about the WNBA, and he has now doubled down on his comments about the WNBA on social media. Some people think it's hilarious. It's not my kind of comedy. I think it's gross. I thought it was inappropriate, and I do think that for Jeff Teague, because of how popular their podcast is and how successful it is and the brand partners and different things that they have, they do have to be more careful when they're having certain guests on. Now, Jeff Teague did not chime in the conversation. He also didn't like actively shut it down. So there was room there. I don't know why they wouldn't just cut that part out. Again, you guys can check it out if you want. I'm not going to give it any more light or clout. Jeff Teague should just be careful with the guests that he has on. Now, what I really wanted to talk about mostly in this video is what they had to say about A'ja Wilson. So A'ja Wilson recently went on the Roommates podcast, and that is a podcast with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. They also do really well on their podcast. It's pretty wholesome. She went on to talk about all things WNBA, her career, this and that. But there was a little like 1 minute discussion that went on where A'ja basically told Josh Hart that she could beat him in a game of one-on-one. So for context, I want to share with you guys this clip.
Score would be like 8-11. Me.
It's not that fun.
I get ball first.
You get ball first.
She does get ball first.
Not gonna get it back. And you could, but that's gonna be your time. Like, that's gonna be your period, which is fine. I'm not saying you're gonna go scoreless, but 8-11, I feel like it's pretty solid. So what do you think it'll be, Josh? Don't piss me off. Do not piss me off.
I was just about to violate this. I'm about to say,
Right.
Man, probably like 11-2.
You're sick. You're sick.
Nah, I'll say like a good 11, probably like 11-7.
So as you can see, it's overall a playful banter, but you can visibly see how, I don't know if offended is the right word, but Josh Hart's kind of like, are you kidding me right now? You really just said you would beat me. For context, you guys, Josh Hart plays for the Knicks. He's a starter. He's had a long career in the NBA. He's one of the best 300 players in the world. And A'ja, while a part of me gives it to her because she is a competitor, and I could just see a lot of people in her position being like, just having full confidence in themselves, like that's the competitive nature in her. I do think that she's a bit delusional here, and also like maybe the slightest bit disrespectful, because I mean, I don't know. We'll get to my opinion after I show you what Jeff Teague had to say. But anyway, this caused quite a stir on social media when it first came out, and this was last month. And then Jeff Teague and his co-host decided to talk about it on their show, and here is what he had to say.
So Asia Wilson can't beat nobody in the NBA.
No.
Yeah, that might get spooky.
Not
bro.
one. Not one.
Not one. They did a whole.
We're talking bench players, everybody.
No.
Sham.
Do y'all know on the bench used to average 40 in high school and nigga 20 in college? All type.
It's funny because
I
did. She was on the Nick podcast. It was like Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. She was just like, if me and you play Josh Hart, who gonna win the game? He said me. She's like 11-7. He was like me 11, right? And they just had like a really funny joke about it. She was just like, nah, I'll get you up out of here. He just like, nah, let's not joke about that.
Yeah, let's not play around, bro. Like, really gonna beat your ass. Like,
yeah, nah. The top WNBA player is not beating the 12th man.
Not beating she's not beating a in the G League.
So,
she's not beating a in college.
So with that, I feel like the internet was a little bit split. Obviously, the banter between Josh Hart and Asia was a little bit more lighthearted. They were just talking about what the score would be. And Jeff Teague goes on here and basically says, Asia is not beating anyone, not even in college. Not in the NBA, not in G League, not in college. And some people were saying like, oh, he's being sexist. Asia Wilson is great. She could beat plenty of guys in the NBA. It created this whole debate, which I unfortunately don't think a lot of the time the debate between are women as good as men in sports is never truly a healthy debate, because if you know sports at all, and if you can truly just be honest, like if we can all just be honest in this situation, Asia's not winning. But that doesn't take away from Asia's greatness. And that's the problem that I have with a lot of these discussions. It doesn't take away from a woman's greatness if they're not able to beat men. That is why we have women's sports and why we have men's sports. There are different categories because there are different physical advantages that men have naturally, biologically, that we don't have, but we don't have to compete with them. We shouldn't have to compete with them, and we also shouldn't be compared to them because it's different. Now, Kelsey Plum, I believe a couple years ago, was on a podcast, and she was asked something about this as well, and I actually kind of loved her response. So let's hear what she had to say.
NBA players you are convinced you can beat one-on-one?
No.
Not one?
Not even someone from the bench. You have to understand, if we're doing like shooting workouts, skill workouts, I'm very confident in anyone that you put in front of me that I can compete. Just sheer size, athleticism, that's the problem. Yeah. Maybe I can score, but like, who am I going to defend? These guards, these point guards are like 6'6".
And I love what she had to say here because I'm in full agreement with her. Like if we were to put some WNBA players, like they did at All-Star last year, some WNBA players against NBA players in a 3-point shootout, skills challenge, like when it comes to just skills, they're not competing physically against one another. I would put money on some WNBA players that they could outshoot certain NBA players. But when it comes down to a game that's as physical as one-on-one, when it comes down to the speed, the height, the quickness, the defensive abilities, that's where I think that Josh Hart and some of these men, and you have to understand, men in the NBA have some of the biggest egos in the world, and rightfully so when it comes to their sport because they have worked really hard to get to that place and they have beat out so many people along the way. And so I feel like their ego is like, how dare you even say that you could beat me? I'm not trying to diminish your talents. And I think Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson, we're so excited to have her on the show and celebrate her and lift her up. And I think that we should be doing that with Asia because she's an incredible basketball player. But it comes down to the common sense of it all. I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think that it should get to the point where we're online making this argument so serious. Like it's truly not that serious. I don't truly think that it's going to happen, that Asia will ever play an NBA player. I mean, she could, maybe set up with a G League player or somebody in that regard. I don't think an NBA player is going to agree to play her one-on-one. And I think that we would find out pretty quickly the difference in skill and ability and physical ability. That's why there was this whole debate when Caitlin Clark was in college, like put Caitlin Clark in the NBA, like she's good enough to be in the NBA. And while I agree Caitlin Clark is good enough as a shooter to shoot in the NBA, the speed of the game is so much quicker and the physicality is so much quicker. And I think one of the purest examples where I could really see it side by side is when I went to the McDonald's All-American game. Dre's sister was playing in it, and the girls played first and the boys played second. And so I watched the girls game, and like Sarah Strong was in that game as well. All of the top 20 high school girls players, and they were so good. And I'm watching them go up and down the court, and I'm really impressed with their skill and their game and their ability. And then 20 minutes later, the men take the court and they start playing, and it's a completely different game. It's so much faster. They're playing above the rim. They're a lot more physical, and it looks almost like you're watching two different sports. That's why I've also advocated for women's basketball, because if you like women's basketball, you like it for reasons other than the reasons that you like the men's game, because it is almost like two different sports. They play the game differently. A lot of things are structurally the same, but that's why I don't even like the debate about lowering the rims, because the women's game doesn't do that. It doesn't need to do that. It's a different game. It's different because of our physical abilities. And so I think firstly, this whole could A'ja Wilson beat anyone in the NBA conversation has blown a little bit out of proportion, but that's what the internet does. It started out as something that was just friendly banter, and I know that people were jumping to Josh Hart's defense, because I am in agreement that I think he would beat her. She would maybe score a couple of times, but if he really wanted to lock down, like, he's going up against the best players in the world, and it's a tiny bit disrespectful to say that you're as good as them, but I understand from her side as a competitor just believing in herself, so I don't fault her for that. So if you're gonna debate about it, it's not that serious. So the women freaking out that everyone's sexist if they say that a WNBA player can't beat an NBA player, not that serious. For the men, getting all whatever about it, also not that serious. Last thing I wanted to bring up, because it was kind of like a case study of this in a different sport, when Serena Williams played against a male tennis player who was ranked like 200 something, and obviously Serena Williams is, I would say, the greatest women's tennis player of all time, and she lost 6-1, 6-1 to a guy who would never even be up there. It's okay. It doesn't take away from Serena's greatness. We can still celebrate her for being number one in women. That's why we have two different divisions. And yeah, that might be the closest that we ever get to something of a one-on-one situation happening in basketball. But anyway, you guys, let me know in the comments below. Do you think people are overreacting to these comments? Do you think there is a world where a WNBA player could beat an NBA player in a game of one-on-one? Let me know what you think in the comments. Of course, thumbs up this video if you enjoyed it, and click that little subscribe button, because we upload new videos every single week. And with that, you guys, I'll see you next time. Ooh,